Ladies and gentlemen, it's over. It is finally over. Wano Country, 4 years and 1 month in the making. The longest arc in One Piece by far and away. From 2018 to 2022. And this arc, wow, what a roller coaster, what a ride. And even in the last chapter, the roller coaster just continues with ups and downs all the way around. So this arc is going to require a lot of videos in the future. When it comes to overviews, breakdowns, I have various videos planned for, let's say, things like lore, character, and of course, power scaling. So even though Wano Country is officially done, your boy is not done with Wano Country, particularly in the anime, where as of late things have gone very, very good. If you want to see those anime reactions to One Piece, you go to my Kingu-san channel, link in the box below, and also your boy's Patreon channel for the full unedited live stream reactions for that content. And also, if you want to see the full live stream reaction to this chapter, of course, you know where to go, the Cole Requiem channel, link in the box below to that channel as well. Now, for this video, the final Wano chapter, you know how we break things down. We have, first of all, of course, as per usual, the pacing and the chapter structure of the chapter, number 1. Number 2, we have the character components of the chapter. And number 3, we have the story progression components for the chapter. And after all that, we have our final thoughts and the review. So, on that note, let's first get to this final chapter of Wano Country, the finish line chapter, with, of course, the pacing and the chapter structure. So first and foremost, this chapter has a total of 4 parts when it comes to pacing and chapter structure. Number 1 is the Flower Capital region. Number 2 is the woods near Tokage in Udon, and a series of small Momonosuke flashbacks. Number 3 is Tokage Port in Udon, with a short skip forward in time for the departure. And then number 4 is back to Flower Capital, with a short skip forward in time for Momonosuke and company arriving back to the capital. So overall, the pace of this chapter is pretty good, I think. Most of the chapter structure flowed relatively nicely from beginning to end, in conjunction with a thematic retelling of events on a stage at the beginning of the chapter. The Momo flashback did kind of feel out of place, kind of unnecessary, but remember that Momonosuke is leaving the crew, and he's been there since Punk Hazard. Since the beginning of the New World journey itself, Momo has been there. So this is the first time in the New World, essentially, where we have separated from Momonosuke, Kinemon, and that clique. Now, the biggest issue for pacing is, I mean, as of late it has been, honest to God, unfortunately, skipped content. For this chapter, once again, this issue crops up. Once again! But the real damage isn't felt on this chapter, I'd argue. It's actually felt on the previous chapter. The major skipped content that we find out in this chapter affects the last chapter where the actual skip itself occurred in. Well, I'll get to those soon. So I think for this chapter, the overall pace and flow is relatively good on all fronts. And again, this from the standpoint of the chapter in of itself. So that is the pacing and the chapter structure. And now let's get into the character components for this chapter. Number 1, Yamato. Apparently, in the days following the Flower Capital party, Yamato made a huge decision to not join the Straw Hat crew. Apparently, she had told Luffy and the crew about this major decision off screen within the few days that were skipped in the previous chapter. So Yamato making this decision despite her previous claims is a sign of what I'd argue is character development here. And recall here that all her life, since she was 8 years old, since from we see chapter 1024, Yamato was trapped on Onigashima, unable to escape until Luffy and company actually arrived. Anyone in the past that tried to help her out was killed by Kaido and company, like for example in chapter 1025. All Yamato really had for any happiness was Oden's logs, Oden's journal, one of the cornerstone things that fueled her great admiration for Oden. Yamato's worldview is very, very narrow, very small, but deciding not to go with the Straw Hats, but rather to slowly expand her worldview and actually stay in Wano country and journey across Wano country, the country that she herself has never actually visited, being stuck on Onigashima for so many years. This is in fact the same thing that Oden did in chapter 962, when after talking with Yasue, he did decide to go on a tour around Wano country. And for her, not going on the greater journey is a big character choice. But a side note though, this is one of the most shocking decisions in this arc. And honest to God, one of the weirdest ones too. Yamato, for the vast majority of this raid, was talking about joining Luffy and the Straw Hat Pirates. She said numerous times, like in chapter 1016, when she told Kaido that she was going out to sea with Luffy, or in chapter 1051, when she told the Straw Hats directly that she was going to join the crew, Yamato decided not to join right away. This would have been a great chance for Oda to showcase Yamato's character development to some degree, seeing her go through that decision-making process and actually talk to Luffy as to why she didn't want to join the crew at this point in time. But it skipped. This is the biggest crime in this chapter and the previous chapter where the skip actually occurred. This is just like Sukiyaki, where he was claiming that he wouldn't tell Momonosuke or Hiri that he was alive. Then a few chapters later, he decides to tell them, and the whole process of his choice, that's why he chose that decision in the first place, that is done off screen by Oda. But in Yamato's case, it's orders of magnitude worse, and it does mess up the structure once again of the previous chapter in a big way. Let me throw out an example of what this kind of feels like right now. Let's say it's Thanos, almost at the end of Infinity War, where he has almost all the Infinity Stones in his grasp. But let's say there's a weekend time skip, and over the course of that weekend, Thanos decides to not go after the last Infinity Stone, and instead decides to raid all the planets with his army that have life on them. Ayo, what? This is what it feels like when it comes to Yamato and the decision to join the crew immediately and go out on the journey to sea. Yes, Oda's skip fruit was very powerful this arc. But over the past 7 chapters, this man awakened that fruit. Guaranteed. So that is Yamato, character plus a side note. Number 2, Monkey, Nika D, Luffy. Luffy's leadership outside the crew is shining in another major way. But this time, the scale is on another level, on a whole new level here. Luffy does not show hesitation to give Momonosuke the Straw Hat flag. Luffy essentially has no issue, quote, ruling, but in a roundabout way. Roundabout because remember what he told Rayleigh in Shimoda Archipelago in chapter 507. I'm not going to conquer anything. Luffy isn't ruling, quote unquote, Wano per se, like let's say Big Mama on Totenland, but his friends can use his name, his prestige, as a shield against enemies. This just so happens to apply to the entire country of Wano country. So he's not ruling it, but Wano country effectively becomes his territory as a result. So that is character for Luffy, absolutely. Absolutely. Number 3 is Momonosuke. Momonosuke has committed himself to surpass his father. This is a very fitting send-off, at least for now, I'd say. But in the future, like an MCU movie, he will return. But since he has always been compared to his father throughout the entire arc, and in so many ways, Momo is not Oden. But that doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. Momo has overcome his helplessness in fighting, and as a leader, he has done things that Oden couldn't or wouldn't do. Yes, he wasn't born with the strength to hurl a wet nurse when he was an infant, or before the age of 10 years old, go and have battles with mafia members across Wano. No. But the fact that Momonosuke, at this point in time, mentally an 8-year-old child, he can now picture himself surpassing the legendary figure that is Oden. This is proof, very damn good proof, that so much of his character buildup has really paid off over the course of the time skip, particularly in Wano Country. I love to see that, and in the future, I will do a deep dive on Momo's character. Now after Momonosuke is, surprise, surprise, Orochi. Orochi apparently could survive for a little longer with his head being cut off and on fire. That's kind of wild. This Zoan endurance sometimes seems supernatural, honestly. And now finally for character, we have Hiri. Hiri is exposed for being a big fan of Mein Kampf. Oh my god. Okay, fine. Listen. Last and absolutely least, okay? Hiri for character. I just want to say that because... hey, yo. Okay, hold on. Wait, hold on. We'll get to that soon enough. So, that is it for character. X Hiri off. That is it for the character section for this video. And now finally, the story progression components for this chapter. Major leaps. Number 1, Yamato will not be joining the Straw Hat crew on the journey out of Wano. Again, as I discussed before, this is weird as all hell, especially since the reasoning for this major decision was done all off screen. As a result, the last chapter's rating suffers a lot, I'd argue, and it does damage to the overall arc rating too. It does do damage to this chapter, but not necessarily as much as the last chapter, where it apparently all happened. Now, to be fair here, there is a we'll pick you up with an Uber afterwards in the future at some point, at some time, that Luffy gives to Momonosuke, Yamato, and Kinemon. But given the context of the implications over the course of the Onigashima raid, it is clearly and distinctly noted that Yamato was coming with the Straw Hats on the journey. But it's tweaked and modified to subvert expectations. Well, hold on. Not immediately. She'll still come with us, maybe one day in the future, as a, quote, Straw Hat. So that window is there, but it's a very small and crappy window. Very old window, like from the 18th century. And it seems, honest to God, that Oda might have changed his heart if Yamato was supposed to join the crew or not. It might have happened, let's say, during the 1 month break, which is why it happened so suddenly. Well, Oden did a tour of Wano Country, so I'll do that too. That tour of Wano Country wasn't mentioned at all by Yamato until this chapter. It was always, I'm going to set sail with Luffy and the crew. I'm going to be on the ship. It was not, hey guys, in the future, pick me up because I'm going to go around a country and then I'll do... No. No. And that's why it's also an issue when it comes to Yamato not joining the crew. Irrespective of if you actually like her or not as a character, honest to God. After that is Luffy. Luffy gives Momonosuke the Stride Flag, and like I theorized long ago, Wano would be Luffy's territory. Yes, to Wano and Yonko territory. Yes. In 2018, I made a video called What Does It Mean to Be an Emperor of the Sea? And at that time, it was right after Whole Cake Island. And Luffy, I said, was missing 2 main things to be an actual genuine Emperor of the Sea. Number 1 was power, clearly. And number 2 was territory. And Luffy completed the cycle of 4 things that I said he needed. The prestige, the military might, the territory, and the power. He has all 4 of these things now, and Luffy is genuinely an Emperor of the Sea on so many fronts. So when word spreads to the world at large that Luffy has claimed Wano Country as his territory, his bounty may increase because Wano Country and the samurai are like world renowned. And Luffy has that placed under his wing after Kaido. Oh yeah, his bounty could raise as a result of that. After this, we have Kid, Luffy, and Law, their crews, finally leave Wano country. This is a gargantuan step forward in the story as a whole. Ladies and gentlemen, Wano country is over. The final act of Wano country comes to a close, and we are done. We are finally done. 4 years and 1 month in the making. Wow. So in terms of progression, huge, massive leap forward. And now we can finally get to other arcs and other islands. It's been such a long time. However, the send-off note for the Straw Hats, the Kid Pirates, and the Heart Pirates is a bit sussy-wussy, and it's Hiri's words. Hiri's words kind of insinuate that the cycle of hatred will continue. Hey yo, the Kurozumi, they all get a big fat middle finger. However, that's if you read the scans and the scans alone. The scans say, and I quote, "The Kurozumi were born to burn." This statement kind of applies to the entire Kurozumi clan as a whole. However, the Viz kind of clears it up, and they don't have any plural verbs and words like where. Instead, they say, and I quote, "Kurozumi was born to burn," end quote. So that plurality is kind of missing in the Viz translation, which means that it's more singular, meaning it's not the entire clan, but this individual Kurozumi, the one that's currently on fire, the evil dictator Orochi, was born to burn. He burns good, real good. But it's not going to apply for the rest of the Kurozumi clan. You get that sense better in the Viz translation. And the cycle of hatred that Orochi himself was trying to continue, no, that is gone. That whole thing is gone. So that is it when it comes to the story progression components for this chapter. Now for the overall final thoughts for this chapter. 3 things that I did dig in this chapter for damn sure were Momonosuke's words of surpassing Oden, Luffy giving the flag to Momonosuke. I thought that was huge. And of course, we are finally leaving Wano country. However, okay, I will not deny that even though the Viz clears it up, Hiri's words are still extremely sus. Off the rip, her words come off like she was an avid fan of the Purge movie series. I always assume that she was talking about just Orochi and the pun of the words of Kurozumi ni Soro, Oden ni Soro. But I can 100% understand why readers are confused. Absolutely. You have to go out of your way to make a list of assumptions and then read various translations, plus let's say potential Twitter posts from other fans of the series who have broken it down that understand Japanese. Really? I have to go through all of that to understand the full scope of what is actually being told here, and it's for the finale. These are like the final send-off words, and they're very odd. So I think Oda could have done a much, I mean, it's shocking. Honestly, it is. Oda could have done a much better job with the execution of this moment. Even as a Japanese reader, I would assume that the pun still seems a bit scuffy because it's still Kurozumi. So that one is odd. And for the send-off, not a good move. And I think poor execution nonetheless. And then Yamato. Yamato is once again another monkey wrench on this as well. And even though there is like this Yamato you can draw later on side card, when you go back to the raid, based on the Viz translation, every time she mentions going out with Luffy and company, it is strongly insinuated that it is the immediate future, not the future. Like, let's say months from now, let's say after we find the One Piece, then she joins. What? Particularly in 1051, she's saying directly to the Straw Hats, I am going to set sail with you guys. I'll be okay with her not joining the crew if I actually saw that reasoning, that thought process, and her talking to Luffy and then saying, actually, Luffy, I'm sorry, I won't go with you guys because I realized that my worldview is so small and going out to the greater world may not be the right move at this point in time. Oh, then start off on a smaller scale with Wano Country. Things like that. But we don't get that. I have to assume that. I have to assume a lot of these things. And no. So even though I did want Yamato to join the crew, I'll be okay with her not joining the crew as long as the reasoning was there. And the reasoning is allegedly there, but it's skipped, therefore allegedly, and it really does suck. Especially where I think personally that Yamato is not a bad character at all. But it doesn't help my camp out because we have this in this chapter for Yamato. Oh boy. So the Yamato situation leaves on a very messy note. For fuck's sake! This is the final chapter of Wano Country. The final chapter, the last chapter. Alright? And unlike Whole Cake Island, where it ends off on a really phenomenal note, this arc, confusion, mismanagement, skipping, so on and so forth, this chapter, unfortunately, I gotta give it a 6 out of 10. The final chapter of Wano Country is a 6 out of 10. Honestly, I think at best. At best. Because even though the things I like, fundamentally, I think that some things just aren't working.